You've tuned in to the Psychology of Black Womanhood podcast, the space where research meets the real world. I'm Dr. Dion Stevens, your host, co-author of the Psychology of Black Womanhood book, and a professor of psychology. Thanks for joining us. Before we go further, I just want to remind you to make sure you follow our podcast on whatever platform you're listening. And also, write a review or drop a comment. We love hearing from you. But let's get into today's episode. While people of all backgrounds get cosmetic work done, Brazilian butt lifts, also known as the BBL, have become especially popular among Black women. Unlike the Eurocentric beauty ideal that's all about being super thin, a lot of Black women are drawn to what's often called the thick ideal, that balance between slim and curvy. And with so many celebrities and influencers either getting BBLs, talking about them, or showing those results off on social media, it's no surprise that the trend has blown up and become a larger part of body image conversations. Since these social media platforms often shape or inform our beauty standards and spread information or misinformation, it's important to understand how they contribute to the way Black women's shared experiences, opinions, and perceptions of procedures like BBL occur within our communities. In this episode, we sit down with Lauryn Grubbs, a doctoral student from Cornell University, whose research explores representations of Black American women in popular culture. She's particularly interested in the use of style, fashion, and dress to communicate notions of identity, status, and belonging. She's the author of the article, Black Women, Brazilian Butt Lifts and Body Image, a qualitative study on the role of social media in promoting the thick ideal. Okay, so you're the author of this really cool article, Black Woman, Brazilian Butt Lifts and Body Image, and it's a qualitative study on the role social media plays in promoting the thick ideal. I mean, great title, very timely, and I think it's something that everybody's heard of, but we really don't have a lot of research digging into, so that's one of the reasons I really appreciate the work you did with this. So maybe we should start off first by explaining what a BBL is, the Brazilian butt lift, and maybe also just separating that from the injections, because I know we get them mixed up.
So BBLs, or Brazilian butt lift, is a cosmetic surgery procedure. And so cosmetic surgery is often interchangeable with plastic surgery, but I want to draw a distinction there because plastic surgery is usually used to reconstruct certain areas of the body that may have been damaged by injury or disease or whatever. Cosmetic surgery is purely just for aesthetic appeal, symmetry or proportion. And so a Brazilian butt lift, or I'll say BBL throughout, is a type of cosmetic surgery procedure, which is basically a liposuction from either the waist, back, or the thighs usually, and then an injection of that removed fat into the buttocks in order to increase its shape or size. And so usually it's meant to get this rounder bottom or bigger in some cases, but then also that liposuction to make the waist smaller. How it's different from a injection, that is not fat transfer. So it's just an injection of synthetic material into the butt, only changing the appearance of the butt. So you're not going to get that sculpting effect that you see with BBL on the thighs or the waist or the back. It's just only altering the butt, and usually with a filler like silicone, rather than, I guess, a quote unquote natural filler like your own fat.
Given there's so little research on Black women's body image broadly, I mean, just general body image research, what brought you to do this study?
The pandemic was, I think, had just ended for me. And so I was in lockdown and I was seeing all of these posts on Instagram about body positivity. We're all looking at ourselves in the mirror. We really need to celebrate our own natural beauty and not let this be a situation where we feel down about ourselves more than we already, feel. But then when I was looking at this, and it was happening mainly on Instagram with hashtags and things like that, I saw no Black women represented. And if it was Black women, they were, actually there weren't. And then even with the non-white women that I saw, it was still like very thin women who were like, celebrate your body. I don't look like this on Instagram. I actually have a little bit of a stomach. And so it seemed like it was really narrow. Like only certain women could come on and say, hey, I appreciate my body without being ridiculed. And so I wanted to look into that specifically and then also see like why Black women aren't represented. One of the things that really interests me was that Black women seem to have a different set of beauty standards. And so that was something that I wanted to investigate within this paper.
We have so many discussions right now in popular culture about this. So Cardi B talked about it, K. Michelle, Black China, Nene Leakes. It's really resonating strongly for Black women, and particularly this cosmetic surgery is the most popular among Black women. Why do you think that is?
I think for Black women in particular, it definitely stems from this idea of thickness and this body image ideal called the thick ideal, which is in opposition from the thin ideal, which is what we see with usually like white women or non-Black women, where the emphasis is on having this like thin and fit body. So you want to be as thin as possible. And we see that in magazines and in fact the fashion industry, but it's a little different for Black women. And so the thick ideal, in contrast, is this idea that a beautiful body would have a voluptuous hourglass shape with thick thighs, a full butt and bust, and then a very tiny waist. And so I think that that's one of the main reasons why BBLs are more popular among Black women than any other group. You kind of see it with Latinos a little bit too, but definitely very big in popularity for the Black community.
When you think back to the people that you observed in your study, were there any sort of within group differences? Were they older or younger? Did they seem to come a certain way? Or it was great diversity in terms of their positionalities?
Yeah, I'm actually really glad that you asked that because the majority of women were very young. They were like 17, 19, 21, usually in their early 20s. And this is very reflective of the demographic that's on TikTok in particular. I'm sure if I looked on Facebook, it would be a completely different demographic group. In terms of like geography, they were coming from all over the place. I want to say the majority was from urban cities just because they had more access to a surgeon who could perform the procedure. And then that also kind of regulates for income. It's a tens of $1,000s procedure if you're going somewhere and, it's credible. But it was very dependent on just, the price of the procedure, where it's offered, and also the platform that I was looking at.
I like how your article contrasted the thin ideal, which is usually what the research focuses on, like trying to be thin. So I'm wondering, do you think this thick ideal empowers Black women in terms of seeing themselves as more roundly, more curvaceous, shapely, or does it create a new kind of pressure to look a certain way?
I think that on the one hand, that's something that really came up in the literature because, with those thin ideal body image surveys, there was like this idea that, Black women don't describe to that. So they're generally more body positive. And I honestly think that's a myth because I think that to have this thick ideal, it still creates this rigid body standard for Black women. And you see that women who might be too skinny or have a, more fuller figure, they still feel the pressure to subscribe to that ideal. So just because it's not the thin ideal doesn't necessarily mean that it empowers them in different ways. I think that it still creates this rigid standard when you look intersectionally, instead of just looking at this like contrast between white women or white women. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but generally, no, I don't think it necessarily empowers. And so that's one of the things that I wanted to investigate within this article.
Your study focused specifically on TikTok, and I'm wondering, why do you think social media is such an important space for having this discussion around BBLs?
I specifically chose TikTok, by the way, just because it had so many like trending little like trends, like dances that were all related to BBLs at the time of my data collection. And it was so interesting because I was like, why are so many people talking about BBLs on this app? And so I looked into it, and social media is a really big medium where there is a lot of conversation about body image and beauty standards because there's a lot of social comparison that can happen on the app. And so you can have a lot of social comparison between, friends that you have. You see this like very curated sample of what they look like, what they're doing. So there's a lot of social comparison there. We can make upwards comparisons with people we think, are doing better than us, or downwards comparisons with people we're like, oh yeah, she ain't got it like I do. But so you have this kind of simultaneous comparison going on there, but then also the presence of celebrities on social media creates another level of social comparison that you can see there. And so with celebrities in particular, there's also this kind of like aspirational aspect to it. And social media, I think, is a medium that makes us feel like we have a stronger connection to celebrity than we actually do. And so it kind of increases that desire to be like, okay, well, if they did it, I can do it, or adopt these practices. So it's a really complex sociocultural phenomenon there that made TikTok in particular a really interesting way to examine these themes.
Your research identified two main themes, which is motivation for getting a BBL and resistance to getting one. What drives both sides of that conversation, and what was going on there?
Going in, I actually expected to see a lot of resistance just because of the mortality rate is really high compared to other cosmetic surgery procedures. And then the ways that I saw Black women engaging with BBLs on the app were like making fun of people who had them. But you're right, I found actually overwhelmingly there were a lot of motivations for getting BBL that Black women were sharing. Three things that I saw with the motivations was this idea of body dissatisfaction from not, being thick. And so that was the main thing. It was women were coming on, and particularly young girls were coming on and saying, hey, I really don't like the way I look. I wish I'm, in the gym, I do ballet, I do all these things, and I'm still not thick. I should just get a BBL. And, other users would come and say, yeah, me too. I hate being not thick. I'm teased. All of these things that, signal this body dissatisfaction specifically related to the thick ideal. The other thing I saw was body dissatisfaction, not necessarily as it relates to the thick ideal, but as it relates to just body surveillance. So this idea of just surveilling the body, separating the parts of the body from the whole biological process, and saying like, hey, I would like to spot fix this specific thing. A BBL can do both of that at the same time. Usually it was the waist and the butt at the same time. And the third thing was this idea of body dissatisfaction coming from self-objectification and this adoption of like, okay, my body represents me before my personality does. And so I want this to be something that's attractive to other people. And so I should get this procedure because I don't feel like it's attractive as it is. So those were the three motivations. As for resistance, there was a few people who would come on comments like, oh, I want a BBL. And they're like, no, it's so dangerous. Like, don't risk your life for this. We'll give it some time. Once you have children, things will change. And so that kind of leads into the second theme of like this appreciation of your natural body. A lot of people wanted women or young girls to appreciate their natural body, give it time, kind of like that trust the process idea. Your body will change. Don't do something that's irreversible now just because of this trend. But the flip side to that was that you saw women who were naturally thick. They were just born with a big boobs, but small waist, coming on and saying, oh, I'm better than everyone because I don't need a BBL. And like, you guys have to go do that. And so it was kind of like this with resistance to BBLs. It was interesting because it was not solely don't do it. It was like, oh, well, I'm thick and so I don't need one. Or another thing I saw was like, don't get a BBL because it's dangerous, but try this, workout plan and this diet that is like drink honey and ginger shots and you'll like drop all your weight and then build it, back up in these places that matter. So even through the resistance, there was still this like motivation to embody thickness.
I'm glad you talked about other alternatives to surgery. So you saw that there was discussion about different ways to still achieve that. What kinds of things were being said or suggested?
Lots of squats, tons of squats. I saw so many posts before I narrowed them down to the sample that I ended up with that were like, oh, you can go to the gym and do these like hip curls, and I'm not in the gym, so if anybody's listening and they know it's not a hip curl, don't come for me. But they're like hip curls and leg thrust and all these things that are used to target the glutes or the thighs, and then of course like crunches to like spot reduce the abs, which was really interesting because they're like these rigid fitness exercise routines. There were also some things like medical procedures like sculpting that could be done with like a suction and take the suction and kind of like move fat around the body, which doesn't actually work, but they were still, suggesting it. A lot of people also were combining like this nutritional advice. They weren't nutritionists, but they were like, I eat 2 bananas in the morning and I skip lunch, and this is helping me get this body, and you guys can try it too. Or even you can subscribe to my channel, and I'll give you some recipes for the smoothies that I make so that you can have this, this thick body like I do.
That's an interesting piece because it's this intersection about race, gender, and capitalism, because people are trying to make a business out of that. How does that play out in terms of thinking about BBLs as a business, particularly online?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that BBLs are typically thought of as a business as it relates to, these like surgeons who are abroad, and people go there and they spend all this money, and it's, they're making a killing. But there's also this idea, like you're saying, of this like entrepreneurship, where you see like an influx of personal trainers now that are willing to take clients over the phone, for money, and they will help you get the body to embody this ideal. Like you don't have to get a BBL. All you have to do is do my workout plan 8 weeks and you'll have it, And so then you also see, as I was saying, the nutritional advice, where people are selling like secret protein shakes. It seems like people have capitalized on the thick ideal now in new ways because of the BBL and because of all the pushback that it's gotten, actually. And then, there's also this thing in the discourse now, which was after I wrote the essay, that is kind of like, we can spot a BBL now. We've seen it so many times. Now we see it. And so here's how you can do it naturally so that it still moves like your natural butt. It still looks like your natural butt. And that's kind of better in a way because it doesn't look as plastic. So I'm sure that that's also driving the entrepreneurial market.
It sounds like a lot of the discussion still focuses on fixing and trying to meet this thick ideal. And no matter what we're doing, it's still trying to achieve something, even if it's talking about trying to be natural. So how do we shift the conversation from fixing our bodies to celebrating them? Or do you see that happening?
That's another really great question. I think that we really do need to shift the narrative to celebrating our own bodies, our natural bodies. I think for Black women, it's particularly difficult because there's been this kind of like historical objectification of Black women's bodies from all sides, both internal to the community and externally. And so I think that it's a major feat to then say, like, my body is my own and I'm proud of the way it looks because it is healthy. It gets me, it wakes me up in the morning. It takes in the nutrients that I'm eating. And so I think that that's a major disconnect of just celebrating the body for what it can do for you instead of just treating it like this object that needs to be decorated or modified to fit some trend, because that's what beauty ideals are at the end of the day. They're trends, they just circulate a little slowly than clothes might, but they're definitely trends. And so in 50 years, the thick ideal might not even be important. And so I think that's also really interesting or important to note when we talk about celebrating your natural body, because your natural body isn't a trend, and not kind of separate the self from your appearance. Do I see it happening now? I do. I do see a lot of pushback in terms of celebrating natural bodies. But again, I feel like it's all kind of undercut with this underlying subscription to the thick ideal at the end of the day.
Yeah, I like how you talk about the trends there because I remember just watching Cam Newton's podcast, and he does a lot around Black men. He actually was stating most recently that the BBL trend is no longer attractive to men, that men are no longer desiring it. So do you think that the male gaze has any role in that? If he's right, will that affect things?
I absolutely think the male gaze has a major role in all of this. I saw that within the research, like a lot of men were coming on to these naturally thick bodies and saying, "Oh my God, like wow, I will pay $1 million to take you out. And it's all in the context of the internet, but then it translates to real life. And you have people saying that. I've actually seen that a lot of like Instagram posts are like, we miss the natural beauties of the 2000s. And, we had so many fine women who were just appreciating the way, no heavy makeup, no lashes, no nothing. And so I think that is, relating to this shift towards being natural and this shift towards presenting yourself, in your natural state because of this male gaze, which is really, regardless of whether or not you want to admit it, it is something that's there, just because of where we live, within the US, in this patriarchal system. So it's there regardless of whether or not you want it to be. And so I think that is something that, drastically affects how beauty trends move, not just for Black women, but women in general.
Given the power of social media like TikTok, Instagram, others, and how they shape our beauty norms so quickly, almost instantaneously, what would a healthier digital ecosystem for Black women's body image look like based on your research and what you think of it?
When I was doing this research, I was reading a essay that talked about all of the negative effects. And it felt like I was reading a guilty verdict. It was like, boom, 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 on all counts, guilty. And so I think that one thing that I would like is for, let's remove ourselves a little bit from social media. I think that within this hyper digital age where you can upload anything at like the drop of a dime, it's really difficult to separate reality from that curated reality that you have. And so I think that really does influence beauty and beauty trends, because on the other side, I'm going to try to find something positive to say about social media. It is a place for, individual expression. And my background is in fashion, as you know. And so we're seeing that like, trends are increasing in like rapidity on the one hand, but then also everybody's able to come up with their own way of expressing themselves, and that directly relates to beauty. And so that's something, if you are going to contribute to the digital ecosystem, make sure that you're seeking to uplift the peers that are also on there. Make sure that you're trying to put your authentic self out there instead of trying to make these comparisons between yourself and another person. Because I think that social media is a really big comparison trap. And I think that's where we get really locked up with beauty in particular. And then also keep posting, because social media is not that diverse as well. So then increasing diversity, increasing representation within the platform, I think, especially when you're seeking to self-value and self-define, can really create a more positive ecosystem like you're talking about, instead of one that is, monopolized with one specific type of Black womanhood.
Okay, so what's next for you? Where are you going with your research now?
So right now I'm in the process of obtaining my PhD. I'm at Cornell University, and I'm studying fashion theory. And so I'm doing similar work. I think I kind of had a departure from body image specifically throughout my master's, and I was kind of looking at how we represent Black women in general, especially within pop culture and media, because the media shapes the way we think shapes the way, we appear. And so that's something that I've found, zooming out from this specific project in the more recent years, is we need to kind of really critically examine the representations that we have, and specifically the impact of beauty and style on those representations, and the way that they kind of become enmeshed and communicate certain things about us.
We were just in conversation with Lauryn Grubbs, a doctoral candidate researcher at Cornell University. She was discussing her research project examining BBLs and Black women's perceptions and its influence in social media spaces. For more details about her work, accessing the article, or where to follow her online, check out this episode page, Psychology of Black Womanhood website. Do you want to dig deeper into these themes? Be sure to pick up a copy of our book, The Psychology of Black Womanhood. It's the perfect companion to this podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, keep reflecting, keep learning, and keep honoring the lived experiences and research centering Black womanhood.